Is The Division casual gaming? December 2018. Developed by Massive Entertainment and published by Ubisoft, Tom Clancy's The Division is an action RPG set in the future Manhattan that is struggling to contain the outbreak of a deadly pathogen. Commonly termed as a looter shooter, this third-person title boasts a realistic modern environment and substantial array of weapons and gadgets, as well as group play and PvP. The game has had a tumultuous time over the years, but strong content releases and dedicated support to this title has bolstered player numbers and kept interest going, particularly with the imminent release of The Division 2. But is it for the casual gamer? Just a note here, I'm reviewing the base game of The Division, for reasons I'll explain later. The Division was announced back in June 2013 at E3 as a title originally slated for the new generation of consoles that were being released at the time. Billed as both open-world RPG and MMO, the news was met with excitement, with the release of the trailer showing off the co-op gunplay, tablet play and PvP elements. Excitement continued when it was announced that The Division would also be released on PC. However, within the next year, The Division was announced to be delayed to 2015. Multiple studios tied to Ubisoft were also brought in to work on different aspects of the game. The Division was demoed again at E3 in 2015, with the release to be late that year. The companion app was cancelled and beta plans were made. These were pushed out to the February 2016 when the beta went live. The Division was officially released March 8th, 2016.
Captain, we are the Wolves. These are my people. This is my city. We're taking it back.
Reviews of The Division from aggregate sites and review sites were generally positive, citing world building, graphics, gunplay and various challenges. The community at large were less enthused, with major game-breaking bugs and issues, the dreaded starting queue.
No, it's actually a thing because this is happening right in front of my eyes right now. I'm in one of the safe houses and that guy over there by the laptop, well, he's the Quest NPC who you need to speak to. And look at this. Watch people just form lines. It's all very British. It's all, I mean, I've got to be honest, it warms me cockles to see this kind of behaviour. But look at how people try and jump the queue, but then they back off. Look at that. That is a superb, orderly queue. It's the sort of queue you'd see down the post office. It's inspirational. Look at it. Look at him. Look at him. They just keep coming in and just, look at that. It's almost like, look at that. It's beautiful. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Jesus Christ, Ubisoft.
Balancing problems, particularly in the Dark Zone, which was a main focus of the game, and then the open world wasn't exactly what was advertised, more an instance loot grind. The main issues derived behind the backlash falls down to what was promised and what was released. Quite a few of the things demoed in the trailers were missing, and that the message was muddled right from the start, using both MMORPG and shooter as the main identifiers, but then not really becoming either. RPG fans weren't happy with the shooting mechanics, and shooters were turned off by the RPG and shooting mechanics. The Division was a commercial success for Massive and Ubisoft, generating the most sales for a new IP release that year, even against Destiny. The developers promised balance changes and bug fixes as soon as possible, even pushing DLC back to work on it. Unfortunately, the issues were causing the player base to collapse. But Massive persevered with the title. They owned their mistakes and with Ubisoft's support took to fixing them. The first DLC, Underground, was released June 28, 2016. The content was randomly generated dungeons that focused on underground aspects of Manhattan and provided additional gear sets. The second DLC, Survival, created PvP and PvE instances of a massive blizzard, and you had to keep warm, find food, supplies and weapons to outlast the hunters and be extracted. This was released on the 22nd of November 2016. The final DLC, Last Stand, took the focus back to the Dark Zone with new areas and PvP modes. A lot of the content was released free to keep the player base interested, particularly with the latest 1.8 patch adding Westside Piers. The DLC, while additional modes and challenges, is not necessary to experience the majority of the game content. The underlying story here is in our current timeline, a biological terrorist attack occurred in Manhattan during Black Friday, and you are tasked with dealing with the aftermath. All emergency services are reformed into a standing army with no experience of this kind of thing, so the division is activated. A first wave go in, but since you can't have a Tom Clancy story without betrayal and incompetence of the non-military government, the whole situation spirals out of control and you are activated as a second wave. This involves dressing up in designer gear, breaking into people's apartments to steal clothes and food, breaking into shops to steal equipment, stealing phones and eavesdropping on other people's conversations. That's totally not creepy.
Hello?
Wondering why the standing army is selling you weapons.
Yo, check out the merchandise.
Murdering anyone that has a gun and their face is covered. Hey, martial law, go nuts, right? Alright, I'll be a bit more serious now. The main goal of the division early is to set up a base of operations and then complete missions to staff, manage and upgrade that base. This usually involves completing main missions and various side missions to earn experience and gear and points that you can apply to various wings of your base that unlock tech and abilities. It is an interesting system, but not so confusing that you don't understand what you have to do at any time. You decide what rooms you want to unlock and manage. Some rooms provide perks and buffs for your character. Other rooms, for example, unlock the ability to find all lore drops if you have finished all the missions in an area, for all you completionists out there. As long as you have a good mouse and keyboard, there is nothing in the controls that are counterintuitive on PC to navigate through. You may accidentally vault over cover on occasion, but the controls are not too taxing. The game does require you to be online, so a steady internet connection is necessary, and it is proprietary servers. Learning your skills and abilities is pretty easy from in-game systems and UI, and for single gameplay, you won't need too much time researching how to do things. Looking at builds for co-op and PvP is a good idea, but there are already guides out there to help you with that. In terms of time taken to get the hang of the game, I would say a few hours to understand the mechanics and get the understanding of how gun classes work for aiming and firing, as each are different, but they don't vary from level to level. This can take up to 30 minutes in a session, but the user interface makes it really easy. The map is based on Manhattan, and one of the most striking things about the Division is how alive the environment is. Now, I don't mean that it changes substantially, as it is permanent winter. You can't destroy the terrain or anything like that, but the city feels alive, as it is a real city overcome by death, disease and chaos. From rubbish strewn in the streets, to city blocks in flames, high-rises, apartments, subways, sewers, fire escapes, shops, the map is beautiful and believable. Day-night cycles, fog and snowstorms only add to the experience. Even things like rats or dogs that will kill birds they come across. You feel genuine apprehension moving into a new area, particularly during the night or a snowstorm. But oh, you are so rewarded for exploring the city. You can find loot crates strewn all over the map that provide materials and additional weapons. It can be a bit of a slog exploring, but you can fast travel to your base of operations and unlock safe houses. You can find other things such as survival guides, phone conversations or echo beacons that provide a bit of lore for what happened previously that build a dossier. And if you take the time to collect them all, you will get additional clothing rewards. The map is split into sections that show the level of the enemies but can be accessed regardless of your level. You can find a safe house that is the main hub for that section and will provide missions for you to complete. It provides a great premise for you to operate in a section and clean that area up to work towards your higher levels. The Dark Zone is a section part of the city that is dedicated to PvP. There is high quality loot that can be extracted from enemies, crates and other agents. Other players will be operating in this area and can either work together, ignore or betray you. Thankfully, recent changes require you to declare you are about to go rogue. One thing that is really outstanding on The Division is the user interface. Operating a bit like a heads-up display, the UI is clean and manageable. You know where you are, where you need to go, what is available to you, what weapons you have and where the enemies are. It gives solid information on your build and how much damage you can do, and you can compare any loot dropped. As a loot shooter, there are a lot of weapon types in the game. You can select 2 main weapons and a sidearm for your character. In addition, weapons have modification slots for scopes, barrel modifications, magazines, underside modifications such as laser pointers, and even paint jobs that provide additional stats and buffs. On top of that, there are additional abilities called weapon talents on each gun, depending on the rarity, and provide additional abilities if your character has the corresponding stats to use them. Nearly all the weapons you acquire through the campaign up to max level are going to be dismantled in the end, and they are there just to get you to that point. The good news with this though is that you have access to a stash box to store weapons and gear that are available to all your characters you create, so you can actually give that good mid-level weapon to another new character and run different character builds depending on what you feel like doing, rather than having to refit your current character from the start each time. The gunplay is excellent in the way of taking cover, suppressing fire, sniping, headshots and recoil. But yes, the complaint of the game having bosses being bullet sponges is valid. This was addressed in later patches, so while numbers still fly around, you do feel like your guns are having an impact. There are also status effects and different bullet types that you can load into your weapon like incendiary rounds, which help with resistance bosses. The Division runs a level system initially to level 30, so you can earn experience from completing missions and defeating enemies. The gear also has a level system that you are required to achieve, not only to wear, but some of those more exotic stats to be available. Once you hit level 30, the map resets, and the enemies reset to 30, and the loot now has a gear score. New loot drops will now also appear in green, which are gear sets, and orange sets that are exotic. You can adjust the difficulty in the map any time to increase your challenge, and in turn the loot drops will increase in higher gear score, so you can level your gear up in different ways. New areas have been added for free, which will test your skills as well. This is a great idea that reuses the map assets, and you can manage how you play so you don't get mismatched loot and drops. Your character in The Division runs 3 major stats: firearms, stamina, and electronics. These correspond to the abilities you can pick. There are also talents you can assign as you level that provide additional buffs and abilities to your weapons and your gadgets. The Division initially boasted of the game being a classless system, so you could build the way you want. However, what that generally means when games say they are classless is it falls into the standard Trinity class of damage or DPS, tank and healer. The Division further enforces this with a tech tree literally based on shields, health kits and pets, tech. The good news is you aren't particularly locked down to certain abilities, since you end up unlocking them all anyway, so you can build the way you want and change at any time. The missions for the campaign are by all standards going to be disappointing, because they'll be rehashed in every section of the city you unlock. From the safe houses you're assigned a set of missions from your handler and a whiteboard. These are encounters that you'll come across that will provide tech points to spend on various wings of your base, and side missions that provide experience, gear and blueprints for crafting. The good news is that these missions are usually run and done in about 10 minutes, so you can unlock an area and it will take approximately an hour to clear out most of that section. But as I mentioned, there are about 5 mission types that are always present, which fall into a hunt mission, securing supplies, fetching supplies, rescuing hostages, turning on scanners, and facing down waves of enemy. There are a few story side missions that have multiple parts, but for the most part they are tracking down echoes that don't have a particular payoff. Some of the missions are downright ridiculous. There are a few main story missions that provide substantial boost to levelling and move along the campaign to its end. These are engaging and well designed and can usually be completed within an hour. They are also repeatable and can have difficulty adjusted for replayability. Enemies are the standard human bad guys, such as thugs, vigilantes, federal prisoners and worst of all, private military contractors. Each have their own specific weapon type, combat style and gadgets that you have to be aware of, and there are larger elites which have specific weak points that can be exploited. The Dark Zone is a dedicated PvP area of the Division, and story-wise is part of what happens in the first wave. In this zone you will find superior loot, higher level enemies, and other players either solo or in teams. Any loot you find will have to be extracted from the area via special checkpoints and firing a flare that declares where you are to everyone. Killing agents marks you as a rogue, so other agents can hunt you down as a reward. Massive initially pushed this zone as part of the endgame on release and has continued to make it a focus. It was unfortunately released broken with glitches, exploits and hard griefing. Patches and updates have changed the system where you now have to declare rogue, but to survive you need to grind to get a decent gear set and a workable build to survive any agent encounter, which is a substantial time sink in itself. Even when doing this review, I went to the Dark Zone solo to find a safe house and managed to pick up a cache to extract. I instantly attracted a duo who dropped their loot off, waited to go rogue and ganked my sorry ass. But if it's something that you want to work towards, something to do when you play the Division, the options are there, and there are a lot of builds available online that work for team fights and survivability. Just, there are a lot better shooters with a larger population out there to spend your time on. So the economy is where the Division starts to go off the rails being an RPG. The base of operations and safe houses have vendors that sell you weapons and gear in the middle of an apocalypse because, yay, capitalism I guess. You have Division credits for the main map and PvE campaign you earn, but then you have separate currency and vendors for the Dark Zone. Why? The Dark Zone originally had superior quality gear and blueprints to earn upon release, so why not? But splitting the current currency creates more points of grind and time. As content has been added, different currencies have also come into play, like Phoenix credits for endgame vendors, Intel points to unlock high-value targets, and even the new global events have their own currency, which is unfortunately time-limited. We won't talk about the travesty of premium credits, which are real money-only credits for cosmetic items and emotes. The vendors themselves keep pace with your level and gear score in terms of selling you decent gear, but random drops by playing missions are also competitive, so there wasn't really much of an incentive to purchase or sell gear to vendors, rather deconstructing it. And that leads to... The crafting system in the Division is basic, but usable in the sense that you get tiers of materials in the form of fabric, tools, electronics and weapon parts. You find blueprints for all weapons, gear and mods from completing missions. Once you hit max level, there are vendors in the terminal that will sell you decent blueprints as well. Lower grades can be used to make higher grades, and it's a simple case of making sure you have the right parts and holding down the button to craft. It is a simple system that will only take a short session to craft the gear that you specifically need for your build, but as in all crafting systems, it does suffer as new content and gear is added, and there is little incentive to craft anything till late game. For the base game, the campaign can be consumed at a relatively easy pace, and you have time to work through all the side missions, finding the lore in the world, discovering hidden caches or materials for crafting, even finding rare enemies that drop special loot. You can move through the Dark Zone for a bit of a challenge in both facing off harder enemies or other players. Once the endgame starts, there are gear sets to hunt for, high value targets and intel to find, you can roam the pier and take on horde mode, and grind various challenges that do appear in the game. The gear and weapon system seems superficial on the surface, but is actually quite deep with builds you can work on for both PvE and PvP using the weapon talents and abilities you've acquired. You can find lots of discussion of these topics online. However, I will admit you will find yourself looking for things to do. Once all the base missions and side missions are done, you can only repeat story missions at a set rate and the main RPG elements set in. Grind. So, is this a game for the casual gamer? It sure is. The ease of controls and gameplay, the immersive city, graphics, and the amount of things to strive for with minimal time and effort are well worth it. You can log on when you want and play how you want. You can run solo, or join up with friends, or see if you can find a team in the hub, so you have a lot of choice. Even just wandering the city itself is an experience. But the game was ambitious at the time, and the dedication and support from Massive and Ubisoft to make this title work and content rich is admirable, but it is too little too late that they have got to this state now, and the Division 2 so close to release. The problem you will have with the Division base is that you will grind away to max level and have a good start on gear when you start running out of things to do and focus on the grinding. The expansions provide additional content, but feels like some of the things that should have been in with the base game. And the DLC is still, to this date, at a price point where it would be easier to spend that money on the Division 2. It has been clear that Massive has been working on the Division 2 alongside fixing the Division to rescue this franchise, so this is what I hoped for. They learned from their mistakes. Well, the hope is that the Division 2, since the future content is free, shut up, will keep the player base. Massive understand that the content keeps the player's interest and working towards a goal. So while the Division is great for casual gaming, I'm really looking on to the future. I hope the Division remains supported after the next year. The Division gives a great taste of what's in store, and if you can pick up the base game for $10 or $20, you won't be disappointed. I am excited for this franchise again.
There cannot be any hope for tomorrow if we don't fight for today.